That alone, verse number 72. Now there is action, which is ignorance, and again there is pure consciousness, which is knowledge. Although these two are thus ordained by Maya to stand divided, a non-dual vision of the Absolute brings about Turiya. Commentary. This verse is to be understood in the light of the previous three verses. In 69 and 70, we were dealing with the libidinal force, and in 71, with the world of becoming. This verse says that Maya institutes a certain alternation, ambivalence, or dichotomy. Yet Maya is defined as that which is not. So how could it institute anything? When we say the wind blows, there is really no such thing as wind blowing. When air is moving relative to the ground, we call it wind, and when it moves fast, we say it blows. It is in this sense that we say Maya institutes something. Where does something which is not get any power to make things happen? It's a wonder. The Absolute is also known only as a wonder. There is a positive aspect of wonder and a negative aspect of wonder. If you are taken by surprise by an unexpected tragic situation, there is the element of wonder in it, but it brings threat and insecurity and creates fear. The other kind is a sudden promise of great joy. Between such excessive happiness and excessive agony, pain and fear, there is an alternation going on. The stuff which becomes modulated in both directions is your consciousness. Regarding the functions of the brain, physiologists speak of nets, loops, and circles. Certain formations in these neurofunctions determine how one's whole attention gets caught within them. The character of the formations impart qualities of particular sensations to us. The formations themselves are what we call vidya and avidya, and because of this the knowledge that is very pleasing to us as well as the knowledge that is unpleasant are both brought under the title of Maya. Since it has so much power to make things happen, let's look more closely at the special state we call Maya. We tend to think of this as a world of facts because of its tangibility. We can perceive it with our senses. Simply because we can perceive a thing does not mean it is giving us pain or pleasure. A stone lying in the road doesn't affect us, except if it enters the context of action. If we fall on it, say, or someone flings it at us, action situations are what call our attention to a specific area of focus. Kriya, action, doesn't refer to only physical action. Thinking and conceiving are also actions. And just what is action? There is a sense of agency in you. The agent within has a motivation to change, to move away from the present state to another one. The present state holds dissatisfaction, boredom, anguish, a sense of worthlessness, satiation, or monotony. So you look for novelty in the new. Any movement to anything other than the present seems to promise this. Henry Bergson talks about what occurs if you already know something is going to happen. Say there is going to be a gathering. You can mentally imagine who the people are who are likely to come where they are likely to sit, what their questions and comments are going to be. You already have a detailed picture in your mind. In spite of all that, when you go there, you will find that the arrangement has an unanticipated novelty. Bergson says, when you turn to even the most familiar thing, from moment to moment, it offers you a novelty. And that novelty is enough to compensate you for moving from the present moment to the next moment. People like Freud may attribute a libidinal interest to this movement. They say the libido in you is seeking gratification. It can either move outwards and get gratification, or it can move inwards, turn upon the self, and attain happiness. But whatever it does, it cannot remain still. There has to be movement. The present verse begins with this condition of action, consisting of an actor, an action, and a result of the action. The result of an action is called karma phala, as it is for the attainment of the fruit, or phala. The action is performed. The motivation for any action comes from thinking you are going to get something you don't have now. This implies two items of ignorance. One is that you are rating yourself in terms of certain mental or physical conditions that are prevailing at the moment and not in terms of the pure self. How often do we identify ourselves with the body and its names and forms, so that our individuated person can be compared with another? Then we think the other person must be happy because they have certain things going for them. We think, if I get that condition, then I will also be content. The first kind of ignorance is called avarna, the veiling of our real nature. We cover up our true nature with an unreal image of our own imagination. Now you have an imaginary self-image of your happiness. When I am like that, I will be happy. Your imagination is positing what you ought to be, what you want to be, what you desire to be. Thus your very future is already filled with an image. You compare your future image with your present one, and invariably feel unhappy with your present image. You feel that only when you come to that future state, you will be able to be happy. This type of projection is called vikshepa, positing an image in what you consider to be your future. That future can be in the next moment, the next year, or in 10 years. But once you have decided it is not now, you have already forfeited your right to be happy at this moment. Until I attain that image, I can never be happy. Such an attitude is an important stumbling block to seekers of truth, who are often motivated by a desire to escape from present circumstances into a supposed heavenly future. This is why it is essential to befriend yourself in the present and not reject your own nature as a prelude to beginning the search. Thus, you invite unhappiness in two ways: by casting a veil over yourself and by thinking of a future possibility. But if you have this moment your own happy image, and you are always asserting, "This is fine with me," then there is nothing to annoy you. Any noble sentiment like the search for wisdom or love or compassion, any of the higher values which can become your motivating force, immediately become affected by both vidya and avidya. Why do you love another person? What is the meaning of love? When love becomes very real to you, what you experience is the forgetting of the otherness of a person and also forgetting your own limitations. In the intensity of love, you forget yourself as well as the other. There is only love and not the lover, and beloved as two separate entities. The most natural, most honest feeling that can come to a person is being drawn not just to one person, but to all. Opposed to this, you have images built up from inside of what you want to love and what is hateful. It is here the dichotomy comes, created by name and form. When your heart goes out to just one person in love, even that is fine, because you are extending your self-identity beyond the limits of your body. You see your reality in the other person also. The other's happiness or unhappiness becomes your happiness or unhappiness. This allows you to cross the frontiers of physical limitation, to which you have become riveted. This part is vidya. It is not nescience that makes you love. It is vidya. It is knowledge. It is wisdom that leads you to it. When love pinches you, becomes filled with anguish and sorrow, it is because you have images about it. These images belong to avidya. The pursuit of love is engendered by vidya, but it often ends up in avidya. You smile and you expect a smile back. You touch and you want to be touched in return. You give and you want something to be given back to us. In this way, you make it transactional. It becomes a contract. And if the contract is not carried out exactly as you want it to be, you become very dissatisfied. Only when love is self-contained and has no hankering behind it does it belong to vidya. Here Narayana Guru says, we have to take for granted what is already there. Our very nature, if we have a body, is such that we will have limitations. The ideal love that is spoken of is hardly lived by anyone. Why? Because we all have our own natural limitations and abilities. However much we try to philosophize, some of these limitations will remain. If a man is angry or mad and brandishing some weapon at you, this is not the appropriate time to say, no, I love you. It is not an opportune moment to embrace him or kiss him either. As Sri Ramakrishna would say, a hissing cobra is also Brahman, but keep away from it. That isn't the time to play with it, despite its divine nature as an integral part of the whole. So there are certain transactional limitations. What is the meaning of Advaya Parabhavana, the non-dual vision of the Absolute? If it is natural for us to indulge in ignorance, and that ignorance has knowledge for its basis, how do we transcend both? We first have to think of three special areas: ignorance, wisdom, and transcendence. Let us examine each separately. There are certain inevitable aspects of ignorance over which we have no control. When a child is cutting a tooth, it is very painful, and the child will often become irritable and cry all night. If the child cries in the night, its mother can't ignore it. She has to do whatever she can to give comfort. No amount of philosophy will help in any way to alleviate the child's suffering. The philosopher's toothache is proverbial. When the pain is intense, simple propositions won't come to his mind, let alone far-reaching conclusions. Buddha says that at the time when you are experiencing some such inevitable aspect of ignorance, You have to lock your fingers, sit firm, and suffer. If that does not contain the pain, then clench your teeth, make a fist, and suffer. If it is still too much for you, then lie on your belly and pound your fists and suffer. There is no other way. Such is the inevitability of ignorance. As Krishna says to Arjuna, whatever has no remedy, accept it. Only a fool will further torment himself. Already there is torment. Let it be. Don't add to it with your own mental agony. You can say, my physical pain is there, and it will take a few days to go away. I just have to put up with it. Once you accept it, it doesn't cause you mental agony on top of the physical. That is the way to relate to the inevitable. Still, if you look closely at the painful aspects of your life, only a very few items are actually inevitable. Most of them are minor things we exaggerate or things we bring upon ourselves. In the area of avidya, there is a very large chunk you can just throw out, and by changing your thoughts and attitudes, the rest of your suffering will be greatly minimized. An area where this can have an important effect is love. Love can be so painful. I love you, why don't you love me in return? How much I love you, why don't you care about me? It brings great agony. And what is this love? It is the love about which Khalil Gibran says, your thirst, your hunger, the hand you hold out in want. You are like a beggar. You are not the rich donor. Let my heart flow to you. You are so thirsty and so hungry that you are in terrible need. You want the other person to give to you. It is this need, this thirst, you call your love. I want to love and also be loved. It's like a contract. If you truly love, you want to see that the person you love is happy. If the other person's happiness is to have their own way, why can't you be happy about that? Many people like Victor Hugo have tried to bring out this point, but they are dismissed as romantic dreamers. There is much more than a romantic dream in it. In contractual love, we do not elevate ourselves. There isn't much difference between an animal caught in an instinctive, reflexive need and we human beings who think of ourselves as far removed from our animal life and yet react in highly predictable ways. At certain times, dogs and cats come into heat. Then they suffer. They go about barking and sniffing and caterwauling through the night. But when their heat is over, they immediately calm down. But human beings are in eternal heat. It doesn't just come once in a cycle. Humans go on perpetuating it, generating the heat out of their own minds. There is a great possibility for us to relieve ourselves of this kind of pain. Suppose you finally get the man or woman you crave or love. What will you do? Put them in your mouth? You can't nibble them like a chocolate Santa. Today the thumb, tomorrow the fingers. They always remain outside. However much you try to press them right into you, you are frustrated by what is called the impenetrability of matter. What you are seeing is lovability. You love the sunrise, but you don't reach out your hand to try to hold on to the sun. Instead, you might take your camera and snap a photo, and then you can feel that you have kept at least a little of what you saw. Then after 2 days you forget all about it. That's much better than mooning about it for months on end. If a rose is lovable, the idea of the worth or value in it is sufficient. The rest can stay in the garden. Once someone visited Rabindranath Tagore, the great poet of love, tenderness and beauty. In all his poems, there are references to beautiful flowers. When this visitor came to his house, he did not see even one flower anywhere. He asked, "O Gurudev, why don't you have any flowers here? You write so much about them. Why don't you have some flowers on your table?" Tagore answered, "I love children also. I write a lot about children. Do you expect me to cut off their heads and place them all around the house? I don't need that. Let them carry their heads. Similarly, let the plants keep their heads, the flowers. I can enjoy them more when they are alive. Let them be where they are. You can also think, let the one I love be where he or she is. My love is just the same. It is beautiful to love." Then that part of ignorance, the anguish, goes. Now we come to the ground on which ignorance rests, vidya. It is only because of spiritual oneness that you love. It is only because your innate nature is wisdom through and through that you are trying to understand things through your senses, your intelligence, and your mind. The senses are limited, but by turning them to many different things, you can expand the knowledge that comes through them. The intrinsic possibility of knowing everything is there. In fact, you are knowledge itself, but as your senses are blind to that fact, you can give them as many opportunities as possible to dwell on aspects of knowledge. Your everyday mind is clouded. By removing the clouds from your mind, you can bring illumination to it, because your very nature is knowledge. Ignorance comes and dwells in the senses, the mind, and the intellect, and yet these are precisely the tools with which you go on expanding the area of your knowledge. In the field of vidya, Maya can function in a very funny way. If you think that after all, it is the pure idea that matters and not anything that has manifested in name and form, then you have created a limitation or a frontier between the manifested aspect and the pure ideational aspect. This may lead you to believe that the person who is actually standing there, smiling at you, is not what matters, but rather the pure idea of the person is what is significant. This is nothing more than another kind of ignorance. That is why in the Upanishad it says, "The person who adores ignorance is living in darkness, but the person who adores only wisdom is living in even greater darkness." You should be able to appreciate a rose which is actually offered to you, and at the same time you should be able to appreciate the idea of the rose, which is perennially beautiful. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. You shouldn't say, "This rose is a perishable one, so I don't want it." A thing of beauty has manifested now as this rose. It may perish tomorrow, but now it is not an expired rose, but a lovable one, so accept it. When you have such even-mindedness, that both in the field of ignorance and the field of knowledge, you have a sameness of outlook, you have advayam, non-duality in your attitude. You accept both with equanimity. This allows you to always remain serene and calm. Narayana Guru says the experience of turiya can also come. What is turiya? We have 4 states of consciousness. One is wakeful consciousness, where there is a difference between subject and object. We also have a dream experience where there is only a subject which is interacting with images born of the same subject. There is no objectivity in it. The third is a state of unconsciousness where there is neither subject nor object. There is only a state of total blindness, absolute darkness. The fourth state the Guru is speaking of as Turiya is that which is maintaining your beingness, your existence, within the state of total unconsciousness, and which is the ground of the operation of all consciousness in the dream as well as the ground of reality in the transactional world. This total ground remains unbroken through and through as the self. Yogis are supposed to experience the Turiya in the state of Samadhi, when they are not transacting with anyone, sleeping or dreaming. The Turiya contains the best aspects of the other three states. In it, the yogi's consciousness has a quality of wakefulness, in the sense they are very alert, but at the same time there is no separation of subject and object, so it is not the wakeful state. In the dream state, there is no objective world, and yet ideas can rejoice in ideas, and ideas can create ideas with ideas. The whole thing is a play of consciousness which is self-founded. The Turiya is also self-founded, but it is in no way a dream state. In the unconscious state of deep sleep, there is absolute peace with no problems. There is no I and mine. There is no separation from anything. Those qualities are also in the Turiya, but it is not a state of inertness. There is no inertia at all. Does the fourth state only come when you are in a state of absorption? There are many arguments about this, but at least the Vedantins and the yogis believe, and the Taoists have something similar to it, in a state called Jivan Mukta, where you don't have to lie still or sit like an inert lump to experience the realized state. One experiencing Jivan Mukta is also in the state of Sahaja Samadhi. Sahaja means natural, innate. Sama means equipoised, and Dhi means intelligence. Sahaja Samadhi comes about through the same element of intelligence with which we appreciate a thing via our senses. The mind works by borrowing the light of that intelligence. It is the same intelligence by which one meditates, wills, acts. In fact, it is the only reality. That spark of intelligence belongs to a greater reality than we normally understand or appreciate. Usually our intelligence is moving around, oscillating, unsteady, so it is called chala, moving. When it is not moving, it becomes equipoised, samadhi. When it is standing firm in the world of wakeful transactions and the world of subjective ideas, it is in samadhi. And why Sahaja Samadhi? The Upanishads say that like a sword being put into its sheath, where it perfectly fits the entire sheath, this one reality fits everything of our beingness. If you are making bread with wheat dough, you can say that through and through it is wheat. Like that, this manifestation itself is through and through of the same Dhi, which we called Chaitanya, and the Guru here calls Chinmayi, that source of all light. You are that. You can say you are born with it. Although you are born with it by the institution of Maya, you don't see it. When you start seeing it, there comes the equipoise. Thereafter you carry that equipoise with you wherever you go, to whomever you relate. You appreciate everybody's excessive attitudes. You understand them, but you don't have to react to them unless you are called upon to do so as a physician or a teacher. If you come to me with an ulcer, there is no need for any fear that I will put you on a table and take out a knife and start slicing into you, because I am not a surgeon. But if you come to me with an ulcer in your mind, I may do something like that to you because you have called me teacher. If I don't play that role, then I can sit as quietly as possible and leave you and your ulcer alone. Then there won't be any trouble. Teachers, even though they are wise, have to come to terms with avidya or ignorance. They have to come to terms with vidya when they are dealing with it, but on their own they stand with sahaja samadhi, the inborn equipoise of the pure state of consciousness, in which you and I are not different. So these are the three areas in which you and I have to apply our intelligence and straighten up our lives. Don't think that by cultivating this attitude, you will lose anything of this world. In fact, you will gain many times the happiness that you now have. The appreciation you have for this world can be greatly enhanced when you assume that state of neutrality. The Mandukya Upanishad defines Turiya as the fourth limb of Om. It is not Ah, the wakeful, Oo, the dream, or the deep sleep. There was a silence before you articulated Om. It is on the background of that silence that you made a modulation of sound, and it is again the proportionate reacceptance of that silence that brings about the Ah transforming into the Oo, transforming into the which then merges back into the all-embracing silence. In the beginning there was silence, then there was a distinction from it in the form of sound, although silence was the ground of it. It is the silence which gives a musical tone to the sound, and again it is that silence which absorbs it back into itself. Finally there comes total silence. The silence which is all through is called the Turiya. You can have all the transactions of the world with the silence as the backdrop of your mind. You can have all the dreams and creativity of the world with that silence as the ennobling, stamina-giving, energizing principle of your creativity. It is into that silence you can go, just as you go to the lap of your mother or your most beloved person. Into that silence you can merge, because you are that. The one who is aware of this all through is having a sahaja samadhi, an experience of Turiya. And the free translation of verse 72 is as follows. One aspect of life is action, and it belongs to nescience. There is another aspect which is permeated with consciousness, and it belongs to the sphere of knowledge. Although these two thus stand divided, as ordained by Maya, to those who are successful in adopting a non-dual attitude, the two together will give the pure experience of transcendence.